Hey everyone, this is Bartobolosi with WHRB Cambridge 95.3 FM, back with another deep dive episode. First, I want to cover some administrative updates before jumping into it. I'm very happy to announce that Tajreen Rahman, a friend in the news department at WHRB, will also be hosting the podcast. We're planning on releasing an episode a week on Sundays on an alternating basis, and sometimes we'll even host episodes together, which will be really, really fun. We're super excited about this. It'll be full steam ahead this semester, and we've come up with a great schedule of topics to cover. I really hope y'all like them. Today, we'll be covering the government shutdown. While that thankfully ended a month ago, a new shutdown is imminent if lawmakers can't come up with a deal or one that Trump will agree to. I also think it's generally good to cover it in a comprehensive way that takes into account all the different ways the shutdown manifested and all the implications it had, since I personally found most classic news coverage could be a bit scattered. I want to begin with the cause of the government shutdown. In the 2016 election, Trump promised multiple times to build a wall on the southern border between us and Mexico. After a presidency where tax reform was the only real campaign promise he delivered on, he was looking for another victory to appease his base, especially with the 2020 election coming up. With Democrats controlling the House now, the chances of a clean border wall bill passing were more or less zero. So Trump and the Republicans needed a way to leverage the wall through Congress. The government's budget, a necessity for the country, was the perfect candidate to do this. What resulted was the longest government shutdown in American history at 34 days, over $5 billion for the border wall. To be fair, this wasn't the first shutdown for the purpose of political leverage, nor will it be the last. What makes this one unique, though, is the extreme human, economic, and security costs associated with the extensive length of this shutdown. This shutdown cost the American economy at least $11 billion. Nearly double the cost of the border wall, which is what caused the shutdown in the first place. It was projected to hurt economic growth by around 0.13% every week, with the shutdown portion of the government accounting for around 1.3% of the United States' economy. Ultimately, this could adversely affect first quarter growth rates, as well as other indicators, especially if a deal to keep the government open isn't reached within the 3-week deadline, which is this week. It's ironic because the shutdown hurt and can still hurt the economy Trump claims to care so much about and have single-handedly improved during the time of his administration. The nation's security was also put at risk during the shutdown, specifically where aviation was concerned. TSA agents are considered essential employees by the government, meaning they had to work without pay for 34 days of the shutdown. Security lines across the country grew larger and larger as the shutdown stretched on, and more TSA agents called in sick to work. By the end of the shutdown, around 10% of TSA agents were calling in sick to work, which handicapped the ability to adequately carry out security measures at airports and threatened to lead to airports shutting down due to the security risk. This is particularly ironic because, in a way, the shutdown ended up adversely affecting the things it was meant to champion: domestic and national security. The real cost, though, was the human cost of the shutdown. When the government shuts down, those deemed essential personnel are expected to report to work without pay. There are 800,000 people considered essential employees by the U.S. government. 800,000 people missed 2 paychecks. 800,000 people had difficulty meeting mortgage payments, utility bills, credit card payments, paying for essential medications such as insulin, and more. 800,000 people had to deal with the consequences of a problem that wasn't their own to begin with, while those in Congress suffered no real consequences like these for the shutdown, even though they were the ones that caused it. I'm going to briefly interject with my opinion here. I find this absolutely ridiculous. I personally can't see any logical reason why the people who have nothing to do with this are the only ones affected, while those who have everything to do with this are still getting paid and don't have to worry about things like where their next meal is coming from or if they're going to get evicted because they're late paying rent. I can almost guarantee that if those in Congress stopped getting paid during a shutdown, at most we'd stop having shutdowns, and at the very least, the length of them would decrease drastically, and members of Congress would feel more pressed to actually do their job, which is to compromise and keep the government of the United States functioning properly. But I guess that's too much to ask. You can't really expect them to willingly jeopardize their source of income, now can you? The income of others who mostly live paycheck to paycheck, though, apparently that's totally on the table in this country. This opens up to a broader discussion about the purpose of Congress here and who's to blame for the shutdown. To start, This country was first and foremost built on compromise. By design, this country cannot function without compromise. Simple majorities are required to pass a bill through the House and Senate. A 2/3 majority is required to override a presidential veto. The House and the Senate can be controlled by different parties at any given time, like they are now, or the executive branch and legislative branch can be divided by party lines. Hell, even when Congress and the presidency are controlled by the same party, there can still be some issues in the legislative process. Point is, this country was founded on compromise and functions through compromise alone. In America, it takes two to tango. This shutdown single-handedly represents the severe breakdown of the democratic and constitutional process of compromise this country was founded on. It shows just how disconnected those in Congress are from their purpose as government officials and to whom their duty lies. They are elected to serve the American people, not their partisan interests. If this deterioration of bipartisanship and the rise of hyperpolarization continues, the American democratic process could very well stall and cease to work as it should. After all, it wasn't designed to work under these conditions. In my view, both the Democrats and Republicans are to blame for the shutdown. Like I said, it takes two to tango. Initial blame can be placed on Republicans for shutting the government down over this in the first place and not seeming to care about the real costs associated with doing so. However, I don't think it's fair to solely place the blame on them for how long it continued. The Democrats are to blame too. In a compromise, both parties must negotiate and be willing to strike a deal. If both parties are unable and unwilling to do this, then both parties are to blame. Placing the blame solely on one party or the other is just myopic. It's for this reason that I commend President Trump for reopening the government when he did. It was the right thing to do, and while it took way too long for it to actually happen, it's good he decided to reopen it despite the heat that he got from those of his own party. Now, what's the current status of the government? Well, the agreement was to reopen the government for 3 weeks, long enough to pay the government employees who missed out on 2 paychecks, and give time for Republicans and Democrats to negotiate a budget for the fiscal year. As of now, the 3-week deadline is quickly approaching. It's this week. It's currently 12:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in my dorm room as I'm writing this episode, and both parties have reportedly reached an agreement in principle with no word on whether or not the president will sign on to it. Some details of this reported agreement have been released, mainly that $1.375 billion is included for better border security measures, including 55 miles of border fencing. That's shy of the $5 billion Trump originally requested for the wall. Whether this passes or not entirely depends on whether or not Trump will concede to the point of having a wall and the exact $5 billion to fund it, and other border security measures. For now, it's up in the air. A lot can happen between now and when I plan to post this episode. You best believe I hope Congress and the president actually do their job and another shutdown is averted. Well, that's all for today. Thank you for listening to this episode of Deep Dive. I really hope you all enjoyed it. We now have an Instagram, so go follow us at Deep Dive Podcast. If you want to see some memes, funny videos of Tajreen and I making this thing, and some other random stuff. I promise we're really cool. As always, subscribe and like this video. Comment what you think about what I said, regardless of whether you agreed or disagreed with me. Hell, show it to your pets if you want. Their opinions matter too. Until next time, though, this is Deep Dive with yours truly, Abrar, and I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you.